Now it's my pleasure to introduce Mark LaLiberte. Mark's a colleague, a buddy, a friend. Mark was with Construction and Instruction, before that Building Knowledge, before that Shelter Source, before that Shelter Supply. And in fact, Mark was on the original advisory board for our cold climate housing program. And we got to spend a lot of time together. Appreciate it. Glad to see him again. Mark. Yeah.
Morning. It's been a long time since I've been able to stand in front of a podium. Someone had asked me at a conference I was at, they said, can you stand in front of a mic? And I said, no, spontaneous combustion. I just have to be moving around. So I'm going to try today to stand still for just a moment. As Pat mentioned, I was at the 1983 Super Installation Conference, and I saw Brian Kern's name show up. Brian Kern was a builder out of Montana, and it was so funny because he came to us and talked about how he was building double insulated walls. He was having a hard time finding the products to put into his houses, so he created a company to sell the products to other builders, and he called it Buffalo Parts, which we thought that was a pretty wild concept in terms of how to sell products. In 1984, I, with two other partners, started a company called Shelter Supply here in Bloomington, Minnesota. And we were selling products at that place where we were talking about ventilation systems, HRVs, gaskets, and sealants. But we considered ourselves experts at selling products nobody wanted. So the only way to get that to happen was then to go out into the marketplace and say, this is why you need ventilation, this is why you need to seal buildings tight. And it was interesting that that's where my efforts with Pat Hellman were, that Pat and I would travel the state of Minnesota to every HBA. I think there were 17 or 18 of them that we would travel for years, and we would both drive all through the state of Minnesota up into places no one should be, and go to Bemidji, Minnesota at -20, and get up in front of everybody for an all-day workshop on building enclosures and building science, all of them with overheads and slides. I remember walking with Pat at one time. We were walking along carrying our slides, and I watched one of my slide trays just tip upside down into the snow. And I remember looking at that going, this is not going to go well. So taking a hairdryer, trying to dry off your slides, just complete insanity. But I think that the part of that was my memory about tenacity and determination, that it didn't really matter. Those efforts were part of what you just did, but it was so passionately committed to the idea that we have to build better buildings. And because we know, and we're standing on the shoulders of giants, and all of us appreciate that so much, I know that I surely am, and thanks to people like Joe you'll hear from, we're all very fortunate to have that continued growth of realizing that what we know, we need to continually communicate. And I think part of that was that I felt it was important for us to discuss a little bit more about our belief was that knowledge shared is really knowledge multiplied. And I think that really shares what EEBA is all about. I think then as Shelter Supply moved through and we sold the company, I created a company called Building Knowledge, where we came up with an idea about teaching building science through different mediums. I started a series of, I did first CDs, a bunch of CDs, that was a technology there, and there were 5 in a little packet. We moved to DVDs, which realized that was never gonna fly. And the strategy there was to continually communicate that. Pat, I did see you mention the Cure for the Common Callback, which was another program that we had created that was called Cure for the Common Callback because of what we were learning as houses continue to evolve. We were seeing things like window condensation and the issues of combustion safety. In my very first blower door work, I was RCS certified in 1985, and I remember we were doing a blower door test on some existing housing, and we would depressurize the house with a blower door and then start caulking and sealing, and someone would yell as soon as we got to 1500 CFM. And we're like, what does that mean? We're like, we're not sure, but it seems like a good place to stop. And I think we should be okay, as we started realizing that maybe we're at a combustion safety zone, or maybe we're going to see condensation increase. But to think that that was sort of an evolution that we began to walk through. And I think that the Cure for the Common Callback really led to moving towards Houses That Work, which is a program that so many people contributed to. We all started going out to the marketplace, and we're still doing Houses That Work workshops as well. In, I think, 2012, myself, Justin Wilson, and Gord Cooke started a company called Construction Instruction. And part of that idea was that we realized that many times, like Joe would do the same thing, we'd go out to do a workshop and somebody'd say, can I have all your slides? And you'd go like, no, it doesn't work. There's a story with each one, a story with each process. We decided to bring people forward, and we created a center, first of all in Phoenix and now in Denver, where we would do trainings. And then recently we brought on Andy Oding and Scott Stevens as partners in the company as well, which we're pretty excited about. Pat had mentioned the pillars that we are all supportive of, and that's really efficiency and air quality, durability, health, safety, all those pieces that go with this. We also have to think about things like sustainability, but more importantly about affordability, or the ability to get to a place where we can build efficient houses that have an economics return. Last week I was in Dallas at the Dallas and Fort Worth Home Builders Association, teaching builders at a workshop, and I said, for the first time this happened, I said, how many of you believe we're building houses too tight? And I kept waiting for someone to raise their hand. It was the first time someone didn't raise their hand. It used to be, how many of you think we're building houses too tight? And the hands would just, arms would almost come out of their sockets, and we would have to address the idea about tight enclosures. It was really nice to see that the idea was, I'm sure there were some that didn't want to raise their hand, but the strategy around that was that, can we help this long-term education process eventually build what we believe are essential? The turning point we're in now, I suppose, is that we're all of us watching social media and the internet begin this sharing of knowledge, and whatever AI will do in allowing people to go on, ask good questions, and get some feedback about the knowledge. All of us are responsible for making sure that as you leave this conference, we're hoping that you'll all go back and share this knowledge. And it is important that you do that, because everybody needs to hear the importance of doing that. As I look ahead, I would say that the vision is really that houses that last longer and improve performance is something we've always had the knowledge to do. We just have to learn how to execute. Builders don't build houses. The trade base does. And one of our greatest challenges is going to be to how we help the trade base learn how to execute along the lines I've seen many heating contractors say, look, I've been doing this for 30 years. There's nothing you can tell me that I don't know. And that's been an interesting evolution across all sides, whether it's insulation, HVAC, or just building enclosures. The last thing I'd really like to share with you is a quote that I have read through from a book, and I've used this quote often because I think it says so much about what it is that we do as an industry. You know, this is one of the most remarkable industries we could ever be a part of. Those of us who have been in it for a long time, when I did a talk recently, I asked everybody in the room to add up how many years they had been in the industry. And I think there was only maybe 10 or 12 tables, but when they got done, they said the collective number was 1,000. Tables with 130 years, 140 years, that kind of strategy of, we do have the knowledge base, we just have to begin to continually execute. So the quote I'm going to share with you is from the Adele's Carpenter Guides. It's actually in the cover of Joe's books as well. And it states something I think is important to remember. It says that when we build, let us think that we build forever. Let it not be for present delight or present use alone, but let it be such work our descendants will thank us for. It is our job and our responsibility to build buildings that stand the test of time, and that 100 years plus is essentially where we have to be. And you can only get that by doing it right the first time. So thank you for the opportunity to not only be up here with these remarkable individuals that I get to work with and call my friends, but for all of you that have come here to learn and listen and share. The times in the bar, the times in the corners listening to people talk. Spend your time listening, ask lots of questions. Be engaged so that when you walk away, you'll find the answers that you maybe have been searching for. Thank you. So, Joe, one of my truly great friends. I've known Joe for an incredibly long period of time. And we've been through a few things. I'm really hoping he doesn't share any stories. But I just want you to know, as many of you do, probably one of the most remarkable and giving people I've ever had the pleasure to meet, sharing his home with hundreds of people every year to allow everybody to learn and to share that knowledge. And he is one of the more remarkable people I've had the pleasure to meet. We all When we talk about standing on the shoulders of giants, I often feel like I'm standing on the shoulders of a giant right here. So please give Joe a real round welcome of what he's done and what he will share with you yet today. Joseph?
Back over and over and over again. You guys are my only friends. And those of you who have known me for years know that's why it's true. The really important message is don't do stupid things. And it's not complicated. We have been doing stupid things for a long time. Let me share with you some things that may not be popular to say, but what the heck, I've retired and I don't, I get to tell the truth now. They don't let me teach undergraduates anymore. Apparently they don't have a sense of humor. So here's the deal. Way back when my Toronto Maple Leafs would win the Stanley Cup, they're a semi-professional hockey team in 1967. I have a t-shirt that says, "Please, once more before I die." An old-timer told me, "Young Joseph, it's okay for things to get wet if they dry." Everybody get this? I mean, is there somebody from MIT I have to explain this to? Wetting followed by drying is okay. But here's the deal. Drying requires energy. And so in the old days, buildings would get wet, but they would dry because of the massive exchange of energy from the inside to the outside and from the outside to the inside. What did we do to the energy change? We dramatically reduced it, which meant that when buildings got wet, they stayed wet. And we created massive damage. We rotted lots of buildings. We're still doing it. If you change the drying potential, you have to change the wetting potential. I mean, anybody not get this? And if you can't do math or physics, you become an activist. So we were stupid first in Canada, and then we exported the stupidity to the United States to get even for the Wayne Gretzky trade. You got our best hockey player, we rotted your houses. We had something called CHIP and COSP. CHIP was Canadian Home Insulation Program, and COSP was Canadian Oil Substitution Program. So when we gave people money to insulate their attics and insulate their walls, the attics rotted and the walls rotted. Everybody kind of figure that out? Then what? Well, we wanted to go off oil because there was this war in the Middle East. Everybody blamed the United States, and they cut off our oil too up in Canada. It's hard to be your friend sometimes. And so we had to go off oil, and of course that meant changing furnaces from oil to gas, and the chimneys didn't work. And to stop the rot, we started to caulk and seal attics, and that caused the chimneys to fail, and people were beginning to die from carbon monoxide poisoning. And so not only did we kill the building, we began to kill people, and that was not good. We, over time, developed spillage and backdrafting tests. Some of the people who pioneered that are actually here. And the technology was exported to the United States and became adopted by the national weatherization programs, Energy Star, and it was quite impressive. The weatherization program in the United States didn't kill people and figured out how not to make the building sick. It was quite a remarkable achievement. The Europeans don't appreciate the fact that, believe it or not, the world leaders in energy efficiency and durability are the United States. It's not the Europeans. We actually go to Europe to have to explain fundamental physics to them. It's quite remarkable. And a lot of the people in this room were responsible for that evolution. Are we going to continue to make mistakes? And the answer is yes. Let me give you some heads up, but that'll lead to failures, but you learn more from a failure than you learn from success. See, if you're successful, you don't always know why you're successful. But if you fail, and then you analyze the failure, you learn something. So I like to point out to everybody that failure has made me the man that I am today. Okay, that was a really good line. If I have to beg for this, it reminds me of my first appearance here many years ago. So there are only two kinds of windows in the world: windows that leak and windows that will leak. And windows are like people. As windows and people get old, we leak. You youngsters have no frickin' idea what's coming to you. So you have to design your buildings to assume that always windows are going to leak. So a leak is not a leak if you kick the water to the outside. And so this water management deal is a really big deal now because of the energy efficiency. It's the second law of thermodynamics, which was put to music by the second best guitarist of all time, Mark Knopfler. You can't get your money for nothing and your chicks for free. And so if we're going to continue to be energy efficient, we have to be way, way more effective in terms of water management. Some of you youngsters are going to be surprised when I tell you this, but we used to go to places called forests and cut trees down and cut them into boards and build boats out of them and sail them around the world. Try doing that with a sheet of OSB. I call OSB the spam of wood. I call spam the OSB of luncheon meats. Are we going to build out of 1,000-year-old trees and boards? No, so our materials are going to be becoming what? More moisture sensitive. Well, okay. We used to line our buildings with plaster, and now we line our buildings with paper-faced drywall. We're building paper buildings. Even the dumbest of the three little pigs didn't build his house out of paper. So are we going to go back to 1,000-year-old trees and plaster? And the answer is no. And now we have the carbon cult. Okay, that was good. So we're changing our materials, and the materials are becoming more and more water sensitive. They're becoming more and more temperature sensitive. So you picture the problem now. We're building ultra efficient buildings with materials that are not ultra efficient and durable. So we have to compensate for that with smart design. And that's the warning. We're going through this incredible learning phase. And you shouldn't experiment on your clients. Okay, and that's what we're doing. And so we need to be more conservative than we are. We need to be more careful than we are. So I don't want you to be depressed. I just want you to know that we need to be better at what we're doing. Right now, we're doing a horrible job of transferring information from one generation to the next. We're not teaching the youngsters stuff. We don't teach architects architecture, not the old way. We don't teach engineers this, except computer simulations. And if you can get any answer you want with a computer simulation. And then don't talk to me about AI. AI doesn't have judgment. If you give AI a whole bunch of information and you don't know whether the information is any good or not, you're in trouble. AI only works if you give it a bank of information that's reliable. And of course, everything on the internet is reliable, right? AI is not going to replace human judgment and experience. So don't even for a minute think, oh my God, we're in trouble with AI. Well, we are in trouble with AI because it's not very reliable. So if the universities and trade schools aren't teaching building science, who's the most effective transference of knowledge in the building science industry and construction? It's called the legal profession. Don't laugh. I'm serious. Because the failures now happen within 10 years as opposed to 20 years, it's within the ability of litigation. So the legal profession has been responsible for more engineers and architects and contractors learning building science. Isn't that pretty awful? I mean, this is an embarrassment. You're telling me that failure is basically teaching us. And the answer is, well, yeah, but we shouldn't learn that way all the time. And so I'm tired of having to deal with colleagues being drawn into litigation by class action people that simply want to take advantage of the situation. We need to do better. So my challenge to all of you is be positive, but we need to be better. And we should make sure that the transfer of information takes place from one generation to the next. And we're not doing a very good job of it. We need to be better. So with that, thank you. Apparently nobody taught me, told me what the hell I was supposed to. Gord, I love you. This is two Canadians hugging.
Yes. Thank you, Joe. So, Mark, apparently you can wander around if you just grab the right microphone. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I will represent two things. One, Canada. Oliver Jurup, Tex McLeod would send and do send their welcoming thoughts, both great names that I saw on the list there, so thank you for that. I'll also represent the new generation, as I'm okay with that, because I actually came to EEBA slightly later than Mark and Joe, and followed along, I would say. Mark gave me that first set of slides, Cure for the Common Callback, and then How's It Work, and said, here, present this. It's like, wow, that's pretty interesting. My start in the industry was actually designing and building one of those things that Mark mentioned, which was a heat recovery ventilator, at that time air-to-air heat exchanger, something that to this day nobody knows what it is or what it does. My own family would say to me, because we were building a family cottage, and I said, we're going to build it net zero, put in all the technologies, and my brother said, oh, we're going to put in one of those HIV things that you make. So a bunch of you heard these jokes before, but I will say I've been so pleased to be an EEBA designated trainer for years. Got to go across, literally across North America, all the way, frankly, to Hawaii. One of the crowning achievements of my career was, as a Canadian, to get a call to go to Hawaii to present building science in February. It's like, what could be better than that? In fact, but the highlight of that trip was not necessarily Hawaii. It was the way I was introduced. Howard Weig from the Energy Office in Hawaii introduced me thusly to a group of folks, just exactly like this. Well, he's no Joe Lstiburek, but he'll probably be okay. And that was my introduction for the day. It's like, what could be better than that? That was pretty cool. But my involvement with EEBA, what I loved about EEBA and like about to this day, and I see this room, was this, and Pat mentioned it, this a confluence of builders. In fact, it was, to my mind, it was a builders club. It was a club of builders, the Jack Guzmandos, the Jim Sargents of the world, who would get together and share their experiences. It was a really good club atmosphere that was then supported by manufacturers, and I love that as a manufacturer's rep at that time, that introduction, the confluence of builders, manufacturers, and then superimpose on that the research communities, the universities and so on, and federal government, and Sam is going to represent that portion of it. I just think that, and to this day, that's the important part of this organization, is to be this confluence of all those groups. I will say, though, I wandered just quickly through the trade floor. I have to say, I kind of miss the old days. It was a little more of a carnival atmosphere back in the old days. There was a lot of ping pong balls bouncing up and down. Anybody remember that? The isonine guys, the cellulose guys. There was those little spinning radiometers there was smoke and mirrors going on with and we had our own, plexiglass front on that HRV so people could see what was going on inside. Turns out there was nothing going on inside. So you put streamers, blue streamers and red streamers to kind of indicate. It was a little more of a carnival atmosphere, and I would like to see that back. And I guess my message would be there's still work to be done, of course, work to be done. As Pat indicated, EEBA has a long legacy. As Mark mentioned, we're still going to be building houses that are going to last hundreds of years. And as Joe said, the changeover, we are roughly at that 30 to 40 year mark, which means there is indeed a changeover, and we're encouraging all of you to be part of that. What I would say is the real value of EEBA is that confluence, that organization of bringing together the four facets of the industry. And we need to keep it a little bit fun. It should be fun, shouldn't it? Building houses for generations of family to grow up, it should be fun. So this session, this summit here back 42 years later, please have fun, listen, work with, and ask manufacturers, ask researchers, ask the building science community to participate in creating this and maintaining this great technology moving forward to bridge that generational gap. So thanks for the opportunity. I always love being here. And I think we're going to do a little panel discussion, but I think my job is to bring up Sam. Is that right? Sam Rashkin. I will say this, I didn't know Sam that well, and we had an opportunity to travel, 5, 6 cities, I guess it was 6, in a tour of Colorado. And I got to drive, and that made Sam nervous, because I said, let's take the hard route, let's go up the canyon or whatever it was. But it was a really fun time to get to know Sam over that 5 days, breakfast and dinners together. And as you will know, he's been this important person, again, helping bridge this gap or create the bridge between the industry and at that time the government source. So welcome, you've already welcomed, but Sam, thanks very much for being here.
Thank you, Gord. So apparently, these 3 gentlemen you've just been listening to are legends, but not one of them knew to take their badge off for the EEBA conference before they came up, knowing they'd be photographed. Also, a quick survey, if you would help me out. Show of hands, how many in this room believe that Joe Lstiburek waited until he retired to tell the truth? Okay, how many show of hands? Yeah, what a ridiculous statement. That's Joe. So anyway, I'm here, so I think I should talk about the thing I know about, which is not building science. It's about market transformation, and my luckiest opportunity to come and lead the Energy Star program. Before I worked for EPA to start the Energy Star program, I was in California doing various projects, technical projects for the California Energy Commission, and I'd get all these flyers about the EEBA conference and look at the agenda, the speakers, and salivate, because policy in California was you're not allowed to travel out of state unless the governor would sign the travel request. So it meant none of us traveled out of state. And I had such envy. I was so upset that I couldn't participate in this group. So my history with EEBA was longing to get and be part of the organization. So imagine my joy when I finally get this amazing privilege to get hired and lead the Energy Star Certified Home program with one minor hiccup. I didn't have a clue how to do that job. How do you lead a national program? I had no idea. Imagine the imposter syndrome that I came into that job with was stunning. And so I had to figure out what skill do I need to even have a chance of being successful? And so I just figured out what my level 4 skill had to be. Now, for those of you that don't know what level 4 skill is, I forget the name of the behavior scientist who came up with the 4 skill levels, but level 1 is unconsciously incompetent. You suck and you don't know you suck. It's really dangerous. You just don't know what you don't know. And then if you really put some effort into it, you can get to level 2 where you're consciously incompetent. You suck, but at least you have a healthy respect for what you don't know. And that's a pretty good place. And then you get level 3, consciously competent. You think and really focus, you can do the darn thing. And level 4, nirvana, is where you're unconsciously competent. You don't even have to think, and you know what you're doing. So I knew building science wasn't the skill 4 I needed. I had to lead change. That was a skill. So I started reading everything there was about change, Good to Great, Crossing the Chasm, and Inside the Tornado by Geoffrey Moore. I was reading, Malcolm Gladwell had Outliers and Tipping Point. Chip and Dan Heath did Switch. I was trying to figure out what the heck you have to do to create change. And lo and behold, I fortunately had a management team that said, just make mistakes. So I took that to heart. We just crashed and burned right and left, trying everything we could. But all the research and effort to look at what creates change finally started to resonate in terms of the things that did stick, the things that did work were because there are certain fundamentals that actually effectively get you to change. And so just like there's building science, material science, there's change science. There are fundamentals that will indicate whether you effectively will go and cross the chasm and go to market or not. And so how did Energy Star happen to be just this incredible program that transformed the industry? Virtually every home built today, worst home allowed by law, 2021 IACC, is kind of a zero energy ready enclosure, basically. So how do we get there? And essentially, when the program began, what they gave me, the team that I've been working on under Brian Howard's leadership for 5 months before I got there, were the EEBA criteria. They said, go do this and get this to market. And what we did that was lucky was we said that was crazy. We shrunk the change because that was too big a change for the industry. I spent 3-4 months talking to builders for 4 months, and I had a healthy respect for just where we could go. And essentially, all we did back with Energy Star version 1 was 30% better than MEC 93. Okay, that is a pretty low bar. But the key thing was we introduced a metric to the industry that didn't exist, where all the other Energy Star products had metrics. SEER for air conditioning, AFUE for gas equipment, dishwashers and clothes washers had metrics. There were no metrics for housing. So we knew we had to hitch our wagon to a metric. We said, well, require a HERS rating, blower door test, duct leakage test, and 30% better than MEC. But with MEC, 93 was equivalent to 100 or 120, we're saving 30%. That's way bigger than we save today. And incrementally we added. We shrunk the change, we got builders to do that. The most important thing was Building America, and the Building America team, Joe and Ibicus and Stephen Winters, they started showing builders that, it's worth doing this, and the costs work out, and that gave us a springboard for growing. And then 2006, we got to version 2 with air barriers. Version 3, we finally got to the EEBA criteria. We had ventilation, we had water management, we had much higher performance levels. And so incrementally, we finally got there. And so the key thing about this is I left Energy Star in 2011 to join EPA, and I said, will these fundamentals work if you apply them again? Everything we learned about change, which was basically remove cost and value barriers, remove uncertainty, remove friction, shrink the change, all these things, would they work again? So we tried it on the Zero Energy Ready Home program, and with 1/10 the staff resources and 1/3 the budget, we had tremendous success with the program. And I started building confidence that change science is really important. And so I'll leave you with just a couple of thoughts. Mark said how important it is to talk to people, ask questions, and really make connections here. And I can't tell you how powerful that recommendation is, because EEBA is going to be unique for you. You know, the people and the diversity of who's in the room and stakeholders, it's amazing what you can come away with. And to give you one example, I'll give you a personal one for me, just my daughter asking me a question, and the epiphany that added clarity about my entire life that came out of her asking one question and how compelling that was. And so those who were in my workshop yesterday, forgive me if I share the story, but essentially I have a condition. I've been talking to people about it and trying to address it, but whenever I walk my wife in the neighborhood, if I see non-biodegradable garbage in the street or whatever, I'm picking it up. It's just something I can't stop doing. So I'm working on it, but that's what it is. I've gotten to the point where I carry plastic bags even when I take walks with my wife, and she's beside herself. She's going crazy with me. And lo and behold, I'm on the Outer Banks with the kids on vacation on the beach, and we're coming back, and I see some plastic and bottles in the beach, and I see my wife's with me and the kids, and I kneel down as if to just adjust the packages and the stuff, let them get ahead, and I start picking up the packages, the bottles and the glass, and my daughter turns around, and she comes back and says, "Dad, what are you doing?" I said, "Quiet, Amanda. Don't tell Mom, I'm just picking up some garbage." And she says, "Why are you picking up the garbage?" That was the question that changed my life. "Why are you picking up the garbage?" I said, "Because I always pick up garbage. It drives Mom crazy." "Well, what do you do if it drives Mom crazy?" I said, "Amanda, leave me alone. I'm just picking up garbage." And she won't leave me alone. She's a professional counselor now, and she just is insanely curious about human behavior and why people do things. And she won't take that answer. It's not good enough. "Why are you picking it up?" And then I blurt this out, this epiphany for me that just explained, because of one question, why I exist almost. I said, "Amanda, by doing this, I have the power to make this place better because I was here. How do I give up the power to do something like that?" And I don't know where that came from. It was like insane, only because of a question that kept probing and trying to understand why I did something. And it explained everything I did in my life in terms I always chose and picked directions, not about compensation or what was the best way to make the most money, but where I could maybe have the biggest impact just because I was involved. And it's so stunning to have that clarity about your purpose. I couldn't believe that came from that simple question. And that's going to come over and over and over again, those opportunities with the engagements that you have at a conference like this. Now, this just doesn't happen on Zoom or virtual meetings. This is when we all make the investment in ourselves to come to a venue like this, knowing we had this kind of exchange possibility. And I'll leave you with one funny thing. The very first job I ever had in life was when I was 13. I would go to the municipal station in Long Beach, New York, and at age 13, they would pay me, give me a check every day for taking a wicker basket with a string and with a group of 20 other people at one end of the boardwalk, walk in various rows, picking up the garbage. That was my first job in life, was picking up garbage on the beach. And when we left the beach, because we were there, it was pristine and beautiful, ready for the day for all the people who came Long Beach to go to the beach. So it's a funny thing. So please follow Mark's advice. Really go after engaging people, having those conversations, and hopefully getting a few epiphanies. I hope this makes sense. Hey, great. Oh. I'm going to remember my job is to introduce somebody next. Unfortunately, it's one of the favorite people in my life that I ever met. G. Myers was just a breath of fresh air to meet a builder who was both passionate about doing better buildings, but also making sure it was practical for a mainstream builder and fully integrated with really good design. And if you know Gene, you know how charitable he is and what he does for organizations locally. If you know Gene, you know that he, during that low times that Pat referred to earlier was pivotal in bringing EEBA back to its current success, along with Aaron, who's been amazing as executive director. And Gene is just one of these people who, when he speaks, you just know it's authentic. It's from the heart. And it's because of everything that's good. You know, Gene is just the best of people in general. And to have him as a friend and know he's such a special builder is just a joy. So Gene, he's up next.
Well, I have notes, so I'm going to stand behind a podium. I'm not near as good of a communicator as the rest of these guys. Well, it's really great to be with you. And, you know, we talked about being in Minneapolis and all over the country. Just so you know, the answer to every question is Colorado. But wherever we gather, I feel a little bit like I'm home, because I feel like you are my people. I want to thank Nancy and Aaron and Gabrielle and Marielle and all the people who put this on. And it's one of the great joys of my career to be a part of EEBA. We do owe a great debt of gratitude to all of our EEBA pioneers, the pioneers of building science. I feel a great debt of gratitude to the programs, to DOE Zero Energy Ready and Energy Star and EPA and Dora Plus, because I'm just a little builder, and where else could I go to learn the important lessons that EEBA has been built upon? So I literally built our business on the shoulders of these people, on these programs, and it's a little unnerving for me to see what's kind of happened to shake some of these foundations upon which I built our company. So we've heard a lot about where we've been and where we came from. And as the builder on the panel, I feel like it's my job to talk a little bit about where we are and potentially where we're going. I do think a lot about the cliches that I've heard throughout my career. There are a lot of cliches out there. I remember years ago, you couldn't go to one of these conferences without hearing the term paradigm shift. Anybody remember that one? There's one that really bothers me that no one talks about anymore, and that's called transitory inflation. How about herd immunity? We've lived through that one. And every time I talk to Sam, I hear about another one called mass customization, and I still don't know if that's ever going to happen, Sam. But I think someday we may look back on today and that cliche or that term may be uncertainty, because we're certainly in uncertain times. As a small builder in Denver, we began to notice it in the immediate aftermath of the pandemic. I remember telling my team that when we experienced a 21% increase in some of our costs over a 6-month period, that there was nothing about this that was transitory, that this was rampant inflation. And I knew from experience that getting the genie of inflation back into the bottle would be painful. The immediate effect on our customers was masked by 3% mortgage rates and free-flowing federal money. The Biden administration ran on a ticket of spending, but they lacked the wisdom to dial it back in time to avoid the stark shift in interest rates that we builders have experienced. The dramatic increases in costs and the prices of our homes was unmasked for our customers when those rates went up. And we found ourselves building a product that our customers could no longer afford. In the Denver market, we had a run-up in prices that was maybe more severe than almost any other market in the country. And our market was clobbered, and so were we. Our housing market in Denver is dominated by large public builders. And another cliche of our time is, quote, when interest rates come down. I hope they will. Maybe we'll hear something about that at 2 o'clock today when Jay Powell announces what the Fed does this month. The same thing happened a year ago when the Fed discount rate came down and mortgage rates did not move. And I'm concerned that linkage between what the Fed does and what our mortgage rates are really is, if the economy's hurting, that's when we'll see mortgage rates come down. And I'm concerned about what that means for those of us who are builders and for this whole ecosystem of high-performance building. That's not a happy circumstance for builders if rates come down for that reason. In Denver, the large builders poured incentives at interest rate buy-downs. One of our largest builders reported spending 13% of sales price on incentives. It was enough to put some of our small peers out of business. And I pity the homeowners who had a 2-1 buy-down in 2022, as our industry sucked them into a ticking time bomb. For sure, we're not seeing foreclosures at alarming levels on a macro basis, but our market in Denver has sagging sales and record inventories of homes on the market. One wonders if that micro-level pain has resulted in weak demand and a loss of faith in our housing market. Now, I know not all markets are like Denver's, and I hope yours isn't. I hope your market fares better. But then comes along the Trump administration, with a bent on warping federal policy to conform to their opinions on things like vaccines and climate change. I marvel at the word policing that is going on in Washington, and I wish for a time when federal policy was based on reason and science. There was a time last spring when we had the Zero Energy Ready Home program funded, but its prerequisites, Energy Star and EPA and Dura Plus, were not. Now we have Energy Star on again, off again, and on again. And I hope that our foundational programs remain in effect. But we're in such uncertain times, it is really hard to run your business and operate against these headwinds. So as I was thinking about this morning, I thought, well, what can I say to encourage us? And I think the way to look at this is to see where I believe we're headed. I think we're headed to a time when AI data centers and crypto mining are going to drive energy costs up to historic highs. Is it possible that our message of energy efficiency will be driven by the sticker shock of our customers for energy rather than federal policy or climate action plans? I believe the wildfires in the West, and even the smoke from those wildfires in places like New York City, will continue, and that hurricanes will continue to escalate. Is it possible that the push for resiliency and durability that we focused on for so many years will be driven by our customer sticker shock from insurance costs or the outright unavailability of insurance? I think we're going to find ourselves on the right side of this history in the making. I think that administrations and presidents come and go. I think that policy will continually shift. And so you begin to ask yourself, so why do we do what we do? Is it because of that policy? Is it because of a program? Is it because of a climate action plan? Next month, it'll be 33 years since I started my high-performance building company. And I just made a decision early on to be part of the solution rather than part of the problem. It really didn't have anything to do with the federal program. I can't even remember who was president then. I have believed that it has never been the wrong thing to do the right thing for our customers and for the planet. And I think you believe the same thing. I am here in 2025 asking the question, has it made a difference? I'm at the end of my career. Can one builder, can even a small room like this, in a huge industry that we're a part of, actually make a difference? Does EEBA matter? Well, my answer is yes. We have changed the world for our customers. When our homes withstood the wildfire of the Marshall Fire in 2021, it occurred to me that maybe our homes didn't just save structures from being ruined, but maybe even lives from being ruined. Can we EEBA builders, small as we are in this gigantic industry, which by the way contributes so much to the declining health of our planet, can we really make a difference, especially if we lose the support of our programs and our policymakers? I'll answer that question with another question. If we don't, who will? Beyond that, as I reflect on my career, the mission of doing what we do best for the people on the planet who need it the most has changed me. It's given me purpose and joy in the journey. That's the joy I have of being here with you, my people. And so I encourage you, regardless of the headwinds of our time, stay the course. In the end, we're defined not by the programs or the policies. We get to decide for ourselves who we're going to be. At times, and I've talked to some of you already at this conference, these are tough times. You may wonder if what you do is significant. But I implore you to be true to your calling, because the life you change will be your own. Thank you very much. And I think my job is to introduce Laura.
Wow, you can't see a thing up here. Hello, everybody. So the format for this session, we have our legends. I've been privileged to work with these guys for a really long time. But really the intent here is for you guys to have an opportunity to engage with them. I do have some questions that I can ask, but we really want to hear from the audience. Okay, here we go. All right, guys, thanks so much for all those insights. Again, a privilege to work with you all. And you heard a few, I think I heard from a couple of you guys, like, what was the thing that said, I am committed to building better? Was there an aha moment? We heard a couple, but I just wanted to kind of open it up to the group to say, okay, I was in this industry, or what made you decide this was where you wanted to be? And I'll just open it up.
I think Joe should start.
I couldn't get a job. You laugh. I graduated with a degree in aerospace engineering, and so when somebody says it's a rocket science question, I actually was a rocket scientist. I couldn't get a job, and I ended up as a laborer on a construction site, and that was the best thing that ever happened to me, because I kept asking questions. Well, why do you do this, and why do you do that? And I got adopted by building officials. Yeah, you're right. An engineer builder who liked building officials. You ponder that for a minute. They adopted me, and I've had amazing respect for them ever since. So it was a happy accident. When I graduated, I couldn't get a job.
Anybody else? Oh, you need
Yeah,
a microphone. We passed, you're good?
I've got
Okay,
one.
good.
But it really goes back to college, and having an inspiring instructor, amazingly, right? I had a landscape architect that talked about the environment and landscape and interaction with buildings. And we started an energy conscious subdivision, and I got in on the planning stages of the first energy conscious subdivision in Ames, Iowa. And there was something natural about it, there was something organic about it, and it was something, what Sam talked about. I just felt I was in my place, and that took me the rest of the way.
Great. Any other feedback? It's just like, I fell into it.
I'll just mention, I always admired so much what Pat does because when we go to the Race to Zero and then Solar Decathlon conferences and you see all those students come in inspired at such a high level, energized at such a high level, you see that their lives have changed and it's going to be part of who they are. And I say that because that's also how I got started. I had 2 years of engineering before I transferred into architectural school. I had to cram 5 years into 3 years to get the curriculum. And finally, the last semester, I had time for one elective, and I somehow chose this energy efficiency and renewable energy course that they had. And that one course, the last semester in 1974, before I graduated to become an architect and take a job, it's like a light went off. Why would you waste? Why wouldn't you use something free right there for the taking every day? The sun and the wind and all that free energy. So it just became almost a ethic for me personally that I was going to find a way to do it. So, everyone else?
I'll tell a quick story because it matches my own. It was actually my son who said to me, he was interested in the building industry, and he's involved with the AeroSeal product. And he said, should I get into the industry? I said, well, why don't you come? We hold a building science camp that's modeled off of Joe's summer camp. We call it spring training camp in Canada. And I said, why don't you come and see what happens? And after the first day, I said, what do you think? He says, boy, am I going to love the building industry. I said, what do you mean? They're all so passionate about what they do. And that's what I love about being involved. I'm not a builder, but I love being around builders. So passionate about what they do. They admit they don't always get it right, but this idea of the passion. So I'll finish the story. He was working for Kimberly-Clark as a sales rep, basically selling adult diapers, to Walmart. And he said, Dad, one 30-year-old sitting across a counter to a Walmart buyer talking about, to another 30-year-old talking about adult diapers, there ain't no passion there. He said the building industry, there's a way more passion. So I match that, and that's why I love being around the industry.
Gets Joe's comment about get older, you leak more.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a tremendous market.
I was going to say things, well, I won't go there. Okay. Any questions from the audience yet? There's one right over here. I think it's Nate, but I can't. Oh, good. I need sunglasses up here. Maybe this is why rock stars play in sunglasses. I'm not sure.
Cowboy hat.
Thank you. Great to hear from all of you. Going off of what I think I've heard a couple of you talk about is that we learn from our failures just as much as we learn from our successes. What are some big ones? Some things that you've learned from over the years, some uh-oh moments that have got you thinking? I remember Gene talking about some dumb taxes paid in the past and some things to work through. What do you say for the next generation? What can we learn and make sure we don't make the same mistakes you all have in the past?
So you remembered my dumb tax comment. So for those of you who haven't heard that, I feel like every time we try something new, we're in the highest dumb tax bracket in town. And I think one of the big challenges we have isn't just the potential failures for the technical side of the business, but what if we get ahead of our customers, and what if we're trying things that they don't value? And I'd say that's been the nature of the biggest challenges that we've had is how do you communicate the value of what it is we're doing, and how do we get somebody to pay for it? Because guess what, if no one does, we don't get to build it. And so I think maybe those are the big challenges that we've had to face, is how do we figure out how to build a great house? And I've often said that it's a sin to build a bad house. It's a cardinal sin to build a great house and never be able to tell anyone about it. And so that's where a lot of the challenges for us have been over the years.
Yeah, I was going to mention, I brought this up earlier, but the idea about our trade base, and it's probably one of my most frustrating sides of this. I know we struggle with this all the time because we still, even at CI, get continuous questions from a trade base that still doesn't believe that building science is an essential part of what they do. So as Gene said, he doesn't build any houses, all his trade base does. So trying to get heating contractors to understand sizing and moisture control and thermodynamics and psychrometrics, and the idea that what you do and the way you put things together does matter. And I've had builders that are still trade contractors still sizing equipment like they did in the 80s. I had a heating contractor in Nebraska. He had a cowboy hat on, and he said, asked him about sizing. He goes, "This is a 3-ton hat." There's a blueprint laying on the table, and he puts it on the hat, and he goes, "Anything that sticks out, I add a ton." So I think there's still a lot of that still out there.
I'm going to steal that. That is a freaking awesome. Wow.
And you can't even make that up. And I just looked at him, I was like, wow, that's amazing. So I would still think that, unfortunately, we forget the trades, and part of this evolution of building science, that there's always this convincing them that, yes, you can right size, not downsize, just correctly size, manage interior relative humidities, manage indoor air quality, and there still seems to be this fight. If we don't get that industry to come around to introduce to its customers and to the builders to say, this is the only way I'm going to do things, and it's an important part of this, whether it's managing water or managing the thermodynamics of the building, we've got to expect that to be a part of it. And we don't have enough trades that come to these events. Builders will go back and say to their heating contractor, "Hey, I got an idea," and the guy goes, "Yeah, not going to happen. Not only will I not stand behind it if you do that, but I don't believe in it." And so we have to make sure that as you translate this information from the next couple days, you've got to be able to convince with passion the importance of following the physics that go along with the change.
And I do want to ask the question, because you alluded to it earlier, this idea that we make houses too tight. I still hear builders, I've heard those problems have houses. No, they didn't. Why? With such an epic fail we knew the science back in the 70s, we knew that houses, if you're going to add insulation, they had to be tight. How did we fail in the adult? I think it's an adult education problem. Joe, how did we screw that up? Why do we still have builders asking and don't get the connection between insulation, air tightness, ventilation?
If I knew the answer to that, it's embarrassing. It's not complicated, and yet we still do stupid stuff. And another bad story coming. Are you ready? Stupid should hurt quickly. When you're a kid, you put your hand on the stove. Oh, shit, that. If you put your hand on the stove and it doesn't hurt for 5 to 10 years, the lesson is lost. So we've been doing stupid stuff, but the pain hasn't been early enough. Okay, now there's my favorite quote from Winston Churchill describing the United States. He said, "Americans can always be counted upon to do the right thing after all of the alternatives have been exhausted." And we're working our way through those alternatives, and it's kind of neat that the stupid is now less than 10 years. It's in the 3 to 5 year range, and you can't run and hide in 3 to 5 years. And I hate to encourage failure, but the failure is important because that leads to change.
I want to follow up on Joe's comment. Surprisingly enough, we got through this whole thing without the old cliche, build tight, ventilate right. But I wanted to bring it up. And what I learned painfully, and I probably still don't totally understand or embrace, is the building industry can't change two things at once. And that's back to Sam's comment. You've got to find a way to, through evolution, to get there, whether that's through failure. And if you changed one thing and had a failure, you know what it was, right? But a wise Canadian came back and said, well, they got it wrong. It's ventilate right, then build tight. So there's a lot about this one step at a time and a lot about this evolution, and make sure we do things in the right order. And some time back I wrote, the order matters. You got to have combustion safety. You got to have ventilation. You have to have moisture control. You have to have air tightness. Then you have insulation, in that order. And yet the first thing that comes up when we talk about anything related to energy, climate change, or anything else, insulation. So just the order does matter, and unfortunately we can't do them all at once. You have to do it in some kind of step fashion.
There's
an industry that's slow to change, quite frankly.
There's a famous quote from John Straub. He says, you can pick your teeth, pick your nose, and pick your butt, but the order matters.
On that note,
That's Professor Straub, not me. I'm just,
you're just repeating it. I just have a follow-up to that. I love Joe's thing, and don't do stupid things, but we continue. We have a lot of people in the audience. I'm hoping, people coming into our industry, sitting there going, why are we still doing stupid things? So I'd love to, I heard a couple perspectives, but I'd love to know, absolutely, why are we still doing these stupid things?
It's a big thing for me. One of the big aha moments was reading a book by, I think, Richard Brooks on listening. I don't think we listen so well to builders. They come from, I don't know if there's a tougher job or a tougher career choice you can make on the planet than building probably the most ultimate consumer product that exists, that's facing hundreds of different codes across the country, massive changes in the economy that changes supply and demand, trends of what are the design preferences, changes in terms of interest rates, changes in terms of new products, materials, supply chain disruptions, trying to plan ahead for the future. This is an incredibly hard industry. I have such respect for builders, it's beyond belief. And then we go to them and say, you're stupid. Okay, not maybe the best foot forward. The fact is, they have such a tough job, and I think just the approach we have to be with them is really pick our poison, pick some ways to solve the most critical problems first, and really collaborate with them in a way that they can absorb the change within all this other forces acting on their industry. So I think the reason why it's hard is because they're trying to manage everything else, and they have no bandwidth left for the new stuff. So we just got to figure a way to communicate, listen. It was amazing for me, just those 3-4 months doing nothing but talking to builders and say, tell me about what's going on here, what are you trying to do, what do you want, and just trying to position things consistent with what they're trying to do. So I think maybe it's a communication issue that we can keep getting better at. We talk about crashing and burning and failing. I keep trying on that. It's hard, but there's a message there, I hope.
Yeah, I think one other thing I'll add to that is just that the other day when I was with a builder, I said, it was hard to believe what we do expect, and it was about cycle time and quarterly deliveries. And I think some of the national builders are really under this idea, I've got to have the lumber still delivered in the mud. Hopefully a crew shows up at the lowest cost per square foot to frame it, and then I still have to have the house completed and finished in 92 days. And if you look at those kind of expectations, we have some cycle times by some of the national builders shooting for 130 days is kind of the outlier, but that's a stunning time frame. To put together a house from a slab of dirt to a finished house with a key, So when you drive things at that change, especially on the production builder side, they're driven by Wall Street. And if they're not able to close, provide the margins, and finish the things at the time, they immediately get hammered right away, and you're lucky if you keep your CEO. So there's a move afoot, I think we've just recently heard about instead of quarterly earning reports to do twice a year reports every 6 months. But the idea of this pressure to drive to the end without realizing that this is a house that not about 120 days, but it's about 100 years. And I think that's the missed point, that if builders had the time in some cases to say, wait a minute, the installation of my weather protection layer, the installation of my foundation drainage, the installation of the air barrier, the proper sizing of my ventilation and air quality systems and my mechanical systems is about the next 50 to 100 years that this thing's going to last. I shouldn't be rushing it. And I'd see buildings stocked with drywall while the insulator's trying to put it in the wall. And how do we get that to be as important as it should be? Is it done properly? It doesn't matter. The drywall guy's sitting in his truck waiting to be next in line. And I think some of that drive shows the incredible difficulty that really represents.
You know, as Sam was talking, I went back to an EEBA conference in St. Louis. And this guy named Sam Rashkin walked down the hill with me to the famous arch. And as we were walking, he was asking me about our business, and I told him about our zoning issues. I told him about our subdivision process. I told him about our trying to deal with the municipalities. And about the time we got to the arch, he turned to me and he said, you know, I guess I don't really know what it's like to be a builder. And I think it's one of the things that defines Sam is that he's had so much empathy and a willingness to listen to builders all along the way. It's what made your programs great. I remember he called me up one time and said, I want to have a meeting with builders in Denver. Will you come? I want to figure out what the name of this energy program is going to be. And we came up with that really slick moniker, DOE0 Energy Ready. Obviously, there weren't any marketers in that room. Dozer, as they say. But that's one of the things that I think has made Sam so successful.
You think that was better than Builder's Challenge?
Joe, anything to add?
No, you guys doing a great job. I'm glad to be up here and listen because my hearing is so bad. The only way I can. Okay, all right. I've qualified for seniors discounts already. Okay, just letting you know.
All right. So another question from the audience. Any questions from the audience? I see right up front.
Hello, Igor. Is there something preventing or have prevented EEBA from having their own, I'll say program for lack of better words, or label, something that's not government, not policy, not incentives, not for the wrong reasons, something that's just, I participated in knowing about envelope, ventilation, airtightness, and I did it for the right reason.
I think that's a really interesting.
Pat, was there ever a designation?
I don't think the EEBA had its own designation. I mean, now it does, of course, with designated builder and trainers, et cetera. But I don't think we ever had a building designation or a specific label or designation. The criteria was really the start of that in many ways. Was if you knew what the criteria were, then you obviously you weren't too far away from being able to, well, if you met the criteria, we can stamp it. But EEBA didn't continue down that path at that time, and it's been picked up by other programs, quite frankly.
And I would say the historical perspective was EEBA builder. There was that you were a member of EEBA. Jim Sargent and others would talk about EEBA master builder. I think there was a master builder program, which I think was really useful. I would say what prevented it is how regional the building industry is. It's difficult in North Carolina to Texas to Hawaii to Canada to put a label that would be appropriate or at least top of mind for folks in those areas. It would be a daunting task, but I like the EEBA designation, and I like seeing get back to that, how EEBA has become, again, more of a builder organization, a builder club, if you will.
You know, there's always the risk also, well, first thing, there are lots of private labels for homes, utility programs starting with Good Sense way back when, and others have been labels. The regional programs, you know, Washington State has their Sonoma County Green Building label, and there's a Craftsman Home label. There's a lot of things that are done in private that could be done. What I want to caution is there's this, for me, label fatigue you can run up against. You know, there's a label for water, a label for air quality, there's a label for Energy Star for zero, there's a label for fortified for resilience, there's labels for walk scores and school scores, and there's so many labels out there. We have to really pick our also passive house and the two passive house, because one passive house is not enough. So let's make sure there's two of those. So
They're not passive.
and then you have green labels, and a green label's not enough, so let's give it 4 tiers. And then within each tier, let's give it millions of possibilities of how you can get to that tier. So what does that label even mean? So labels are hard. We have to pick our way to do this right, where it can solve a real problem and help the consumer make a choice that's more informed. And so that's what I would caution about all this. And note that during the process that Gene mentioned, uncertainty, we're going to shut down the Energy Star labeling program. Already there were discussions about how to privatize and take it away from EPA and run it in a private way, and it could be done. So.
All right, thanks. Any other questions from the audience?
I think we'll ask.
Sorry, can I just add?
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I wasn't looking for another label, trust me on that one. But what about a checklist that just helped with the choices as opposed to meeting all these criteria?
Mark, your CD series had a series of checklists.
Yeah, I think the goal and the hard part is that it's consumer education that's got to be part of this. And I think we just want them to be better shoppers. And unfortunately, shopping for a house, I often tell builders, I said, 85% of what you do is never seen. And I use this quote that integrity is doing the right thing when no one's watching. Almost everything that happens within the house is done by people trying to put the right things together in the right order, but at the end it's the kitchen, it's the countertops, and it's the cabinets. So we have to help buyers, I guess, understand what it means to shop better and to understand what that looks like, and for builders to be able to communicate that back and forth. There's these BS and beer clubs going around all over the place where builders are getting together and try to decide what are the proper physics for their region. And might do that, but I'm always nervous about programs because they put higher risk on whoever does that. We can't endorse builders or can't endorse a project. You got to just say you've got to learn how to do a better job, understand how to communicate that effectively, and make sure that the buyer understands what it is that you're communicating. And most of that's about this, listening to people's experiences and letting them tell you what they want is most oftentimes the way that we successfully let them know what you're going to deliver.
That idea of checklist, though, was incorporated in your guidebooks, right? The various guidebooks always had summary chapter lists of the do's and don'ts, I think.
I think checklists are really important and helpful, but what happens is what happens with the code. To cover all the bases, it becomes very tedious, very prescriptive, and pretty soon you lose track of what the goal was, and that's performance, right? So I'm not saying checklists are bad. I'm saying just temper them with what's the ultimate goal here, and are you going to achieve the performance that you're trying to chase with that very supposedly. I mean, think how many times you've been into the car dealer, and they've got, the 85-point checklist when you do your oil change. How much confidence do you have when you go out the door with that list? I think there was a lot of checking going on and maybe not really checking your car. So I almost say it was just cautioning. Always keep the goal in mind. That's the ultimate goal, is the performance of the building.
I think the why is so important. You have to know the why. The tech, you're doing all the work. But thanks for the question and like the feedback. There was one in the back.
I thought there was one in the back. Yeah.
Yep, go ahead.
Hey everyone, I'm Billy Giblin. I work with ResNet. I'm also, my other hat, I'm a mayor of a small town, Nederland, Colorado. So I'll wear both hats for this question because I want your perspective. In attracting, not attracting, but just making this line of work more of something people think about, as that kids think about. So our little high school had a career in technical education track, and the construction track was going to be one of them. And out of the whole high school, only 4 kids in all total were interested. So they ended up just canceling it and moving it down in the valley to the bigger schools. So what can we do as an industry and to attract kids to a line of work that maybe doesn't involve big student loans, like and more conventional education, and getting into the trades and just making this a field people want to do?
That's a great question, and I remember the last thing I did before I left DOE, I was asked with 3 other people to do 10 minutes on growing workforce. And so I just put together, I said, what I would do is go to high schools with this basic content. And essentially the first thing is you have 2 choices how to go into the workforce. You can spend 4 years and $250,000 getting a 4-year degree, or 0 to $10,000 getting a training to be a trade. So 4 years versus 2 years or no training if you go right into an internship program. So you can, and hundreds of thousands of dollars lower cost. 2, you have a job. I showed all the pay compensation for jobs coming out of college and all the pay compensation for all the trades. And you can see all these trades were almost in lockstep at the same or sometimes higher than a lot of the college 4-year degrees at $250,000 4 years. Then I had a comparison between jobs that could be outsourced in industry versus construction, and the reduced risk of outsourcing is huge in the trades. And then AI exposure for trades versus all these jobs that are at risk of being lost to AI is tremendously less. So the basic message is just educate kids that you can make almost as much money or sometimes more without 4 years, without hundreds of thousands of dollars for a 4-year degree. You can have a job that is not at risk of being outsourcing, is kind of future protected from a lot of impacts of advanced artificial intelligence effects, and at least let our kids be informed on some 4 basic points before they make a decision. This is an opportunity that's pretty compelling for, getting to work right away. So I think just giving the information in a way they understand it, same salary, less risk, could be helpful.
Anybody else? I think that's a great concept. All right, we just have a few minutes left. Any other questions? Yes, I see a hand down here. Well, I barely see a hand down there, just saying.
I'm walking as fast as I can. Here we go. There you go. Please introduce yourself first.
Sure. Hello, I'm Stephanie Vega. I'm with Ferguson, and I lead our Sustainable Solutions team. Jean, I'd like to say that we find the same challenge in promoting products that have a higher price point simply because they are sustainable or efficient. Excuse me. My question really revolves around what you all believe is the future of water reuse and water conservation technology or innovation in the home, especially in water-stressed areas. I know there's a ton of focus on energy, but I'm curious on how y'all think about water.
Well, I think the correct answer to that question is Colorado, just so you know. But I'm thinking about it in the terms of the Colorado River. Yeah. And there's a crisis in the West, and I'm not sure if those of you in the East quite understand how dramatic it is, but there's no doubt in my mind that water conservation is is maybe the next huge topic in our industry and in our society. And so, you know, I hate to see programs like EPA WaterSense get gutted. I hate to see the progress that's been made towards moving to, and that's a label. And I remember we were working with, I'll go ahead and use the term, the name Kohler. We were working with Kohler years ago, and we moved away from them because they didn't have a WaterSense shower faucet or shower head, and turns out now they do. And so those programs and labels have meaning, and it's a standard that a manufacturer can aim for. And we think about, well, why can't we get the builders to do things? Well, we really can't do it unless the manufacturers are there ahead of us. Mm-hmm. And so, so the actual answer isn't Colorado. The answer is, I see that as an area of growing importance. A lot of us in the room know Jacob Atala from KB, and I remember riding around on a bus with him at an Owens Corning event years ago. He's from Jordan, and he said, you know, we think the wars are going to be about oil. The wars are going to be about water, and I think that that's just a shadow of things to come.
And it has that, sorry, Mark, it has that theme. Pat and Joe, you both said, you know, the short-term pain was back in the 70s of the oil embargoes, the scarcity of oil, which spurred all of this, right? So I think scarcity of water is going to drive that in the same way that this happened. And
well,
Mark,
I'll just share. I live in Arizona, and that's talk about we've taken all the water you can give us from Colorado. So thank you for that. I think what's very interesting there is in Arizona, though, we see no grass, no lawns. Water resilient trees and plants. The community there has really realized that if we're going to build there, we got to make sure that the things that are there don't consume the levels of water that they once did. There's nobody mowing lawns. My yard is nothing but you know, gravel and trees and some plants that are all designed to be there. Sometimes I look at the desert and I'm like, how is that thing still going? It never gets any water, maybe 4 inches a year, and it's still beautiful. And it's flowers, and it's those places where we have to be more respectful of what are the resources that are available, how do we build according to that. So many places I'll go in California, I'm driving to Sacramento, and I'm looking at these massive areas on the side of the road filled with grass and sprinklers and lawnmowers. I'm like, what a waste of water. So if we just did a better job of appreciating where we use water and how we use it, I think there's enough. I serve in my community on the water board, and watching how much variation there is between individuals and how one family uses this much water and another family uses 3 times as much. So we also have to learn ourselves as to how to be more respectful of that. Price tends to dictate that. In California, there are 5 tiers for what you're going to pay for water. When it gets up to the highest tier, you're spending $1,000 a month, so I hope that really feels good to take the longer showers. And part of that is what drives change, is that price like energy in California, the highest tier of energy is 38 cents a kilowatt. So if you kind of look at those motivations, water has now become that. Be smart and efficient with the water you use. You've allocated enough that we do have enough water if everybody uses a reasonable amount. And I think that will work.
Just one more point on this is global. There are about 1,800 major aquifers on the planet, and almost 80% are in significant decline. So water's a global issue. And I love showing the map of the US in a lot of presentations I do that shows all the major water resources. And you have the whole eastern section of the country, which just has extraordinary amount of flow and rivers and supply systems, and then you get west of the Rockies, and it is freaking scary. Just that Colorado River, just trying to give as many states as possible water, and the San Joaquin River system, and then you get up to the northwest and finally get some water. But the swatch of the country that is underserved by any meaningful water supply once you get west of the Rockies. So you can start there and have a massive market opportunity for really providing solutions. Water is just so huge. and it'll move east as systems get compromised.
Well, I think we're almost at time, but I'm going to close with one last question. So first, I want to thank you all for your personal leadership in this industry. I mean, you are the legends of EEBA. So I'm just going to close with the last question of how would you coach the next generation from a personal leadership perspective to help drive impactful change in our industry? So I'll even if it's your 30-second answer.
Well, I would say it's such a great industry. The enthusiasm of the industry should drive. The more knowledge you have, the more enthusiastic you have. So learn, ask questions, listen. I'll yield the rest of my time to the representative from the great Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
You get to change the world, and one building at a time. It's a remarkable feedback. You feel insanely good and positive about it. That's how you inspire them.
I'd say part of it is remember that you get to change lives, and as Joe said, you're creating opportunities for families and continuous families that raise children and really make this world a better place. The last piece of that is do it with passion. And when people see that and they feel that passion about the way you feel about it and how important this is, gets to bring people to you that say, I want whatever that is. And you're like, it's here, is what that is.
I'll just mention one of my first books that I still have on the bookcase, Design with Climate. Goes back to the water, the energy, and all these things.
Yeah.
But my last comment really goes back to Wayne Gretzky and why he was such a great hockey player. He says, it's easy. He says, you don't skate to where the puck was. You don't go where the puck is. You try to anticipate where the puck's going to be. And as an educator, academic, I'm always trying to figure out where will the puck be and move towards it.
You know, for me, it's kind of simple. People spend 70% of their life in their house. Cars, outdoors, dining, work. We spend 70% of our life of our lives in our homes. And so this, again, is you have power. I get back to this concept, what moved me. You have the power to make people live better because home is where life happens 70% of the time. So if that doesn't inspire you, I don't know what would. But for me, that's the big point.
You know, my advice is don't go it alone. It's one thing to have personal passion and drive and beliefs and values, but it's really hard if you're alone. And I found EEBA. I hope you do too.
Well, thank you guys. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.